Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I wish I could speak German, but I hope we will be able to understand each other as well using English. And first of all, I would like to express my great gratitude and thanks for being invited here. I must say that Darmstadt is a place on a map that is particularly dear to me, and it has added a lot to my development. And thank you so much, Jill, for being a part of it, and thank you so much for your kind invitation. And I would love to say also thank you so much, Regina, because you're the best host ever, and I feel coming to you like coming back home. So thank you for having me. But I would love to tell you a little bit about mazurkas, because I know that with Chopin we take many things for granted, but when examined, they turn out to be a completely different thing than we thought. So with mazurkas, I would love to explain you how Chopin thought of them through sounds of true folk music. But first, before we go there, why mazurkas? To me, mazurkas are the most interesting genre in Chopin's writing, simply because he wrote them actually an entire life. You know, he started composing them when he was a 14, 15 years old boy, and the last piece he ever composed before his death was in the form of a mazurka. So, as you heard in the introduction, there were over 50 mazurkas. We assume 57, but actually we don't know exactly, because we have 12 to 15 manuscripts that we are almost certain they were composed by Chopin, but with 3 of them we are not quite sure. There must be more examination, and I'm sure he composed many more. They were simply lost over time. But with 43 compositions that were published during Chopin's life, we are certain about their authenticity. But also, we can, by looking at them, discover how Chopin developed as a composer and as a human being, thanks to this huge time span that he took from his life to dedicate partly to mazurkas. And from my personal thoughts, each time I open a book with mazurkas, I treat it a little bit like a personal photo album, where with every single page you see the time passing. But what was the form of this time passing in Chopin's case, I will explain you briefly very soon. Going to the folk art, to the origin of mazurka, I would love to underline something very important that was not obvious to me as a music student when I was much younger, that mazurka is not one dance written for the piano. It's actually a combination of 3 national dances, and we will learn the styles of the dances. The first dance that you have to add in order to have a mazurka is kujawiak, the second mazur, the third oberek. What unites the dances is triple meter. So, to put it in a simplified way, you count 1, 2, 3 in every bar. It's the same case with polonaise or waltz. So it's pretty simple, but what distinguishes mazurka dances is the rhythm and actually accents, because they fall on a weak beat. So with mazurka dances, you have accents on the second and third beat. So it goes like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's basically the accentuation. I should be much stronger with it, but you will hear it in the actual mazurka dances. So what differs in the dances are the figures that are used, their character, and regions of origin. And we will go through the 3 mazurka dances so you understand well the differences when listening to Chopin music. First is Kujawiak. Kujawiak comes from Kujawy region, and this is a very important region in Chopin's life, simply because his mom was born there, and he visited this region, many little places in this region, during his life quite often. Kujawiak was a wedding ritual dance. It was rather melancholic and it had a lot of longing, mostly in minor mode, and people who danced it, they danced on slightly bent legs. And we will hear some Kujawiak examples played on a violin and played on a flute. Can I please have example number 11? these were the examples of Kujawiak, and I really wonder if you ever thought that actually the origin of Chopin mazurkas sounded in this way. Because the recordings we are hearing today are pretty much authentic. I mean, they are as authentic as we can get. They were recorded in the middle of 20th century, when the tradition of Polish folk musicians slowly started to die out. And people from Polish radio company wanted to rescue as much as possible, and since the recordings were already available, they recorded folk musicians playing. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly if the tradition was absolutely the same in 19th century, when Chopin was walking through Kujawy and listening to different sounds. But from all the sources available, this is the most authentic source we can get of Kujawiak from Polish folk art. But going to the second dance, because this is the first one, we will speed up a little bit. Now we have much more vivid and energetic and decisive mazur. Mazur, the name mazur was taken from an old-fashioned name of Mazovia inhabitant. And mazur was first danced among peasants, but very quickly it got adapted to novelty salons, and it became a dance of Polish novelty in a medium speed, just to underline the nobility of the person who danced, and it got a very characteristic rhythm going like... This is a typical mazur rhythm. And as a mazur example, I would love to ask for number 13. Thank you very much. And we speed up the tempo even more. We got to the third dance, that is the quickest dance. It was called oberek, and the main figure of it was to turn around as quickly as possible. It had also some other names. It was sometimes called round or roll up. And this dance, often present also among the pieces that you will hear tonight, is very characteristic because very often the melody goes almost in half circles, so it goes up and down, like trying to imitate the main figure of the dance. And I would love to play you oberek from example 26. Thank you very much. So actually, a combination of these three dances, Kujawik, Mazur and Oberek, served as a base for this classical mazurka. And I'm sure for those of you who heard this sort of folk art for the first time, it was quite disturbing to an ear because of the sound quality, because of the difference in feeling music, I would even say, because it's very hard to capture very often where they start a phrase, where they finish, where is the main beat, different accents. This is something that our classically trained ear are not so much adjusted to. And it's very good we got a little bit distracted by the sounds, because like that, I'm telling you, we will completely different listen to the mazurkas that we prepared for tonight for you. But when it comes to the folk art, what's very important from what you've heard, the main instrument that was used was the violin, the fiddle. There were also some wind instruments used, but not so many. You heard a little drum in the last piece. This was also quite a common thing to hear. And very often there would be also a double bass with one string only. And I'm sure some of you who read Chopin's letters, they already know that Chopin played this instrument on some party occasions, you know, when he was visiting his friends. So we have a testimony that he was playing in a band accompanying some party, I think it was a wedding occasion, and he played with that fiddler. And what's also very important for folk music, it repeats a lot. And since the melodies are simple, they are based on few motifs that keep repeating itself. It's actually very important to embellish the melody every time or play it slightly different every time you repeat it. And this is quite often seen also in Chopin's case when he gives us a subject of a mazurka. Each time he repeats it, he shows it from a slightly different perspective, always changing some little elements, sometimes the melody, sometimes the articulation, sometimes the dynamics or accentuation, different matters. And also, you heard this gentleman singing from time to time on the last track. This was not that common for men to sing during folk parties. Usually women sang. But men sang such short fragments on different occasions, and you can also observe while listening to Chopin's mazurkas that, of course, the main tune is the most important, but sometimes he introduces in the bass, in the left hand, a little imitation of a man voice singing. And also, you will hear another example that I would love to show you of another thing that is also present in Chopin's mazurkas. A very common tradition was to sing without any accompaniment and then give the signal to the band and let the band play. And then there would be only an instrumental fragment. They would stop, they would allow a singer to sing solo again, and again signal, and the band entered. And there are little fragments of unisono in some of the mazurkas where the melody is introduced without any accompaniment, and it's a little reminder of actually this folk tradition. But before we move on to Chopin mazurkas, I would love to present you 3 more fragments. First 2 will be the same tune, but in the first example it will be sung. In the second example, it will be played by the violin. And this is a famous tune, Oj chmielu chmielu. And we know from Chopin's letters that he took this subject to improvise during his concert in Vienna. Whether it sounded identical as in this example or not, we don't know. Because what's very common for the folk tradition is that it keeps changing, because it was not written down. It was, passed on to next generations, and everyone added some little personal elements to it. But just so you know, let's listen to this tune. Example 1 and 2.
Poszła dziewczynę pół ogródkoju, kopać dołeczka swemu wiankoju. Jedołeczka nie skopała i wiunecka nie schowała, jedzie do domu. Jedołeczka nie skopała i wiunecka nie schowała, jedzie do domu. Idzie do domu tak smutniusieńko, Jasieńko za nią tak pręciusieńko. To ju kocho, to całuje, to i pierścień obiecuje, ona mu płacze. To ju kocho, to całuje, to i pierścień obiecuje, ona mu płacze. Och chmielo, chmielo, ty rozbójniku, zdradziłeś dziewczynę na pasterniku. Och chmielu, o nieboże, w las na górę zliść nie może, trzeba drabiny. Och chmielu, o nieboże, w las na górę zliść nie może, trzeba drabiny. Och chmielu, chmielu, chmielu nieboże, zdradziłeś chłopaka, nic nie pomoże. Och chmielu, o nieboże, w las na górę zliść nie może, trzeba drabiny. Och chmielu, o nieboże, w las na górę zliść nie może, trzeba drabiny.
And you probably wonder how much of it Chopin possibly heard. The examples you hear tonight come from two regions, Mazovian region and Kuyave region. And I don't know how familiar you are actually with history of Chopin's travel, but he traveled quite a lot, being still in Poland before he parted for good abroad. He traveled quite a lot for two reasons. First of all, he was always of a weak health. So he had to cure himself already as a young person, and because of that he needed to go to different places that had better circumstances to do so. And other than that, he was a very friendly person. He had many people who liked him among his friends, who invited him for summer holidays to stay at their places. And because of these two reasons, he has been to quite a lot of places, including Mazovian region, where he actually lived, Kujawian region, that's nearby, where his mom comes from, Ziemia Dobrzyńska, Dobrzyn region. It was also quite close to where he was living, but he also went down to Silesia. He went to Wielkopolska, Great Poland, to Małopolska, Little Poland, also Lubin region, was a region that he visited, and he even went up north to Pomerania region for one of his visits. And on this occasion, depends on the situation, but he experienced quite a lot of true folk music. And I would love to quote one excerpt from his letter, where he describes a very funny scene. I would love to see it. He was passing by a place where he where he heard a lady singing, and he was so interested in the lyrics, but he couldn't really understand her singing, so he paid her a little to encourage to sing again. And he describes it in a way as follows. On 29th of the following month, Monsieur Pichon, this is the anagram of the word Chopin, while passing through Nieszawa, heard a Catalani. Catalani, by the way, was a very famous Italian singer at that time, so he's a bit ironic here. While passing through Nishawa, heard Catalani sitting on the fence, singing something with her mouth. It took him a lot, and he liked to hear the aria and the voice, but not content with it, he tried to hear the poems. He passed the fence twice, but in vain, because he understood nothing. Until, at the end, moved by curiosity, he drew 3 cents, promised them to the singer if she would repeat the song to him. She spent a long time spinning, wincing and finding excuses, but encouraged by 3